So sit here. You won't be able to see this quite so easily. You'll get to be sort of start the show. For the first part of the show, for my talk, just sit here and then I will explain that we have these three lectures and we're going to help them finish them. And the way we do that is two parts. Your one part and the bananas part. Your part is you sit down because every time
Welcome. Very warm welcome to all of you, but in particular to Mark Abrams and his team of Ig Nobel awardees that, as every year, come back to EPFL. This is Nicola Marzari. I'm a professor here, but I'm also the director of the National Center for Competence in Research, MARVEL. And so like with every free show, you need to go through 2 minutes of a commercial. And this is also an occasion for me to tell you about the science that we do that is all about computational design and discovery of novel materials. I often say that materials enable the technologies that power our economies and sustain our societies. And really the reason why our standards of living are so much better than humans living 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years ago are because of inorganic materials and what they contribute, and organic materials and what they contribute to medicine. So if I were to tell you, what are the areas of societal impact where materials can change the world, where they go from energy to environment to the high-tech and high-value industry that sustain economies like ours in Switzerland, and along this long list. But rather than reading words, I just wanted to give you some graphical sense of what it means having materials for the societal well-being. And this is probably the most notable example, is the reason why many of us are alive today, and is the material that probably almost no one in the audience would know. And this is actually the iron-based catalyst that was discovered by Haber, Bosch, and Mittal in the 1920s, and that made possible ammonia synthesis. And it's just because there is ammonia synthesis that we can actually produce all the food that feeds more than 8 billion people today. These days we think a lot about the environment and sustainable sources of energy. Photovoltaics are a very good example where we need inexpensive and efficient materials, actually like those that are developed here at EPFL with novel perovskite solar cells. This is another example. Every time you look at a smartphone, this is possible because there are materials that are transparent and conductors, so you can have a screen that you can control with a button. There are batteries that are powerful enough and squeezable enough that can give you power for the entire day. Next time you fly, just remember this is actually the turbine of a modern jet. So the temperature in the combustion chamber is a couple of hundred degrees hotter than the melting temperature of that blade, and the blade doesn't melt and can run so efficiently just because there are thermal barrier coatings that cover the nickel superalloy there. We have electric cars, and we are electrifying transportation because we have lithium-ion batteries that were only invented in the 70s and commercialized in the early 1990s. And we might have quantum computers, and those need quantum materials. And this is not only, I would say, big science, but is also big tech, and I think is refreshing. We started 10 years ago doing computational design and discovery of materials, but these days, these are just the last 2 years. Google, DeepMind, Microsoft, and Meta have all launched massive efforts in material design and discovery. Happily, we don't do only research, but we also think at how to develop novel strategies for technology, for knowledge and technology transfer, for education, for equal opportunities and communication. And this is just one example where we bring all of you to, as Mark says, laugh, but also think. Okay, I think I've used all my time, and I think it's now important to ask Professor Manus Koupakis, that is visiting us, to bring Dr. Livia Fava-Quattropani, that is the program manager of MARVEL, to come to the podium to deliver the traditional welcome address. Please come over.
Welcome. Welcome.
And let me add, welcome. My name is Mark Abrams. I am the editor of a magazine called The Annals of Improbable Research. And back in 1991, I founded something called the Ig Nobel Prize ceremony. Many of you in the room are familiar with this, and many are not. I'll give you a little bit of history here on this. I will also tell you about a few people who have won this prize in the past, and very quickly tell you about the most recent Ig Nobel Prize winners. And then we have 3 teams who recently won Ig Nobel Prizes, who have joined us tonight, traveling great distances. Each of them will do a short talk explaining, if they can, what they did and why they did it. And then we'll take a few questions from each of you. Not from each of you, from a few of you. Just pardon me for 20 minutes while I plug things into the machine here. All right. This is what I'll be talking about, improbable research. By improbable, I mean probably not what you expect, and the Ig Nobel Prizes. And all of this are really about things that are surprising, things that are so surprising that they make people laugh and then think. So surprising that people's immediate reaction is probably going to be to laugh, and then these things will stick in their head, and for the next week or whatever, all they want to do is tell their friends about it. The Ig Nobel Prizes are prizes for things that have that quality, that make people laugh, then think. Every year we choose 10 winners of the Ig Nobel Prize. We get something like 9,000 new nominations every year for this prize. We choose 10, we offer them the prize. They can say no if they want, but almost everybody says yes. And thank you, all of you, again for saying yes. And they come to a ceremony, which I'll show you a little bit about. First, a quick look at some winners from the past. And again, this has been going on for a while. This is our 35th year doing this. What you see here is a member of the team that won the Ig Nobel Peace Prize about 15 years ago. He is Swiss. And he won it, he and his team, for this paper you see up in the top corner is the beginning of the paper, and it's called Are Full or Empty Beer Bottles Sturdier, and Does Their Fracture Threshold Suffice to Break the Human Skull? I'll translate that into simpler language. What they were trying to test was, is it safer to be hit over the head with a full bottle of beer, or to be hit over the head with an empty bottle of beer? That's what they tested. And when he came to the Ig Nobel ceremony, that's where this photo was taken, at Harvard University in the US, he gave his acceptance speech, and then he demonstrated. And perhaps a few of you in this room came here About 10 years ago, the first time I came here to talk about the Ig Nobel Prizes, he was one of the winners who came that year, and he did a demonstration right here. He had had a beer across the way at the bar there first, and when he got up here, he forgot that he was going to do this demonstration. We had to remind him. This is Dr. Elena Bodnar, who won an Ig Nobel Prize for inventing the thing you see here. She calls it the emergency bra. It's a brassiere, which in an emergency can be quickly separated into a pair of protective face masks. One to save your life, one to save the life of some lucky bystander. She has a patent for this. That's what you see part of here. This was inspired by her work as a young doctor. She grew up in Ukraine, and she treated victims of the Chernobyl power plant. I won't tell you the whole story, but that was the beginning of all this. At the Ig Nobel ceremony, she gave the first public demonstration of this technology. At the Ig Nobel ceremony, we not only have the winners who have come from around the world, but to physically present the prize to them, to shake their hand and hand them their prize, we have a bunch of people who have Nobel Prizes. There you see a demonstration with 3 Nobel laureates of this technology. The winners are kept very secret until that moment on stage. So these 3 scientists did not know until a moment before this of the existence of this, let alone know that they would be demonstrating on live worldwide television. The man in black here won the Ig Nobel Peace Prize a different year. He is the inventor of karaoke. He won the Peace Prize rather than some other category because by inventing karaoke, he invented an entirely new way for people to learn to tolerate each other. The Ig Nobel Physics Prize went to the team that did this work. You can see the beginning of their paper here called Pressures Produced When Penguins Poo, the Calculations on Avian Defecation. This photograph is of a penguin taken from above, and those white streaks are excrement from the penguin. What this team of scientists did was calculate how much pressure must build up inside a penguin to make this happen. If you're in this particular branch of biology and have been following the scientific literature, you'll know that just a few years ago, another team, inspired by reading this, did even more elaborate calculations to refine that number. This is from a patent that won an Ig Nobel Prize. The patent was granted in 1965 to a married couple named George and Charlotte Blonsky. They described this as a device to assist a woman in giving birth by using centrifugal force. When the woman is ready to deliver her child, she lies on the equipment. The equipment, as you can see, is a large round table with some machinery underneath. She lies on her back on the table. They strap her down to the table, and then the table is rotated at high speed. And the last of these older prizes I want to mention was given in the year 2008. It was the Ig Nobel Peace Prize, and it was awarded to the Swiss Federal Ethics Committee on Non-Human Biotechnology. Anyone here a member of that committee? They shared the prize with all the citizens of Switzerland. Anyone here a Swiss citizen? Yeah. Congratulations. You all won that prize that year. By the way, were you born that year? Did you exist there? Good, good. They won for adopting the legal principle that plants have dignity. You may remember that there was a vote that year, and you as a nation voted that it is now part of the legal system here, that plants have dignity and must be respected legally. The committee met and produced this large book to explain all of this in detail. And it was one detail that won that Ig Nobel Prize. Here it is in the book. I'll read it to you, and you can read it yourself. It's on what they call arbitrariness. The committee members unanimously consider an arbitrary harm caused to plants to be morally impermissible. This kind of treatment would include, for example, decapitation of wild flowers at the roadside without rational reason. There are people watching this webcast live who are not in Switzerland who probably do not understand why you were laughing at this. I expect they do understand why you were laughing at this. All right. That was a handful of the past winners. You can see a full list of all the winners, 10 a year, every year since 1991 on the web, on our website at improbable.com. And now I'm going to very briefly run you through the most recent crop of winners. This ceremony happened last September at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. This photograph was taken at the very start of the ceremony. It happened in the most famous lecture hall at MIT. And this is all of the winners, that line of people. Those are all the new Ig Nobel Prize winners being led into the room. And their identity and what they did was still secret. It's kept secret until we announce it. And at the ceremony, we had 5 Nobel laureates who took part, who handed them the prizes. Also, lots of other stuff going on. As you can see, there's some white stuff on the floor. Those are paper airplanes. There's an old tradition at the ceremony and here at EPFL of people throwing paper airplanes. If you have any more to throw, please do. And it's always interesting to see the designs for you. And you also notice up on the right a little thing that says this year's theme, Murphy's Law. Every year we choose a theme for the ceremony. The theme doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the things that win a prize. It's for everything else. Everything else is a lot. And especially every year we write a new mini opera, a little opera about something in science. And last year the theme of the ceremony and the opera was Murphy's Law, which many of you know. Murphy's Law is the idea that if something can go wrong, it will go wrong. And several Ig Nobel Prizes have involved Murphy's Law, including a prize to Murphy. And Murphy's Law seems like a joke to people unless they're an engineer. And good engineers realize a strong respect for Murphy's Law is really the basis of being a good engineer. If you don't expect everything that can go wrong will, and if you don't plan for that, your bridge will fall apart, your airplane will fall out of the air, your cup will start leaking water, everything will go wrong. Right. The Ig Nobel Peace Prize went to the psychologist B.F. Skinner. This was a posthumous prize. Skinner died many years ago. The prize was awarded to him posthumously for experiments he did to see the feasibility of housing live pigeons inside missiles to guide the flight paths of the missiles. He wrote a paper about this, and this is part of the paper. He realized how this looks to people because he began the paper. These are the first words of the paper, where the author says, this is the history of a crackpot idea. This was just as World War II was starting, and they were trying to figure out how they were going to guide missiles. And this turned out to be one of the best methods anyone came up with at the time, although it was never used for this purpose at that time. Skinner's daughter, Julie, came to the ceremony and accepted the prize on behalf of her father, and that's her right there. The Ig Nobel Prize in Botany, the study of plants, went to an international team who found evidence that some real plants imitate the shapes of neighboring artificial plastic plants. This is their paper. Vocula trifoliata mimics leaves of an artificial plastic host plant. And I strongly suggest if you have any interest in one of these or any of them, go look up the paper. The details are far more interesting than the little summary that I'm giving you here. And here's one of the team members at the Ig Nobel ceremony about to collect his prize, and the person over there on the right is holding the prize and is about to hand it to him. That's one of the Nobel laureates who is present. The anatomy prize went to a large team, and 2 of its members are here. You'll hear them talk about it later. For the moment, I ask you just to stand up and take a bow, the 2 of you. I'll give you just a quick summary. You'll hear the fuller story from them themselves in a little bit. They won the prize for studying whether the hair on the heads of most people in the northern hemisphere swirls in the same direction, clockwise or counterclockwise, as the hair on the heads of most people in the southern hemisphere. This is their paper, Genetic Determinism and Hemispheric Influence in Hair Whorl Formation. Okay? Except for people sitting in the front row, I'd like to ask you to do a tiny experimental favor right now. If you could look at the head of the person sitting below and in front of you, and just raise your arm and indicate by twirling which direction does that hair swirl. Okay, if you're wearing a hat, please remove your hat. Okay. Thank you. If somebody would like to record all this data, please do. Something I didn't mention until this point is, at the Ig Nobel ceremony, we have 10 winners, we have an opera, we have a lot of stuff, and we try to make sure it happens very quickly. The winners get to talk longer at the ceremony than anybody else, and we tell them, you get about 1 minute. And the way we enforce that time limit is what you see here. Every year, we recruit a very cute and very powerful little 8-year-old child. She sits on one side of the stage, and whenever she feels somebody has talked long enough, this tiny, cute little child gets up and she walks all the way across the stage up to the person who's talking, and she looks up at that person who's talking, and she says, "Please stop, I'm bored. Please stop, I'm bored. Please stop, I'm bored. Please stop, I'm bored." And she does not stop until they do. And it works. Okay. Something else to notice here was something we tried for the first time at the ceremony a few months ago, and it worked out really well. We had a very good artist who traveled all the way from the Netherlands to do this, who during the ceremony, each time a winner was announced, went to the blackboards. This is an old lecture hall at MIT, so one wall is filled, as you saw in the photo, with blackboards. And she drew a little drawing to illustrate what that person, what that team did to win a prize. And it was quite helpful and entrancing to see. The Ig Nobel Prize in Medicine last year went to a team of 3 people who demonstrated that fake medicine that causes painful side effects can be more effective than fake medicine that does not cause painful side effects. This is the paper they wrote about it, called How Side Effects Can Improve Treatment Efficacy, a randomized trial. And here's one of the team members who's just come through the sacred curtain to receive his prize. And you can see the Nobel laureate on the right about to hand it to him. Ig Nobel Prize in Physics was presented to James Liao for demonstrating and explaining the swimming abilities of a dead trout. This is his paper called Passive Propulsion in Vortex Wakes. And on the right, you can see a photo there of a dead trout at various points in time as water was flowing past. And he did find by experiment that you can take a dead trout, put it in flowing water, and vortexes, whirls, start to form, and the fish will actually swim upstream into it, even though the fish is dead. So I don't know whether this is any useful metaphor for you in your life and your future, but if it is. And here he is, the moment he was announced as an Ig Nobel Prize winner, carrying a toy dead fish about to receive his prize. We gave a prize in the field of physiology to a large team from Japan. They won for discovering that many mammals are capable of breathing through their anus. Is anyone here capable of? And if you are you willing to demonstrate? Here's their paper about this. It's called Mammalian Enteral Ventilation Ameliorates Respiratory Failure. And if you look at the paper, you'll see they have some very serious medical uses very much in mind for this. And here's part of the team. Most of them flew from Japan for this. And I think they flew mostly so that they could and would and did do a demonstration on stage. We gave a prize in the field of probability. It went to a very large team. 2 of the team members are here, and they will explain it to you in a little while. And here, too, for the moment, I would like to just ask the 2 of them, please stand up and take a bow. They won the Ig Nobel Prize in probability for showing, both in theory and by 350,757 experiments, that when you flip a coin, it tends to land on the same side as the coin started. Here's the beginning of their paper and some part of the middle. It's called Fair Coins Tend to Land on the Same Side They Started. Evidence from 350,757 flips. And you can see the beginning of a long list here for each coin and the history of the coin. One coin they flipped 1,000 times. One coin they flipped 2,500 times. And here are 2 of the team members, one of whom is also here tonight, accepting their prize at the ceremony last September. We gave a prize in the field of chemistry. As you may be guessing, the categories tend to change a little bit from year to year. And by the way, we do not have fixed categories anyway. We, unlike other prizes, we pick the winners first, and then we try to figure out for each winner, is there some category that describes this? The chemistry prize went to this team, and here also we're fortunate to have one of the team members with us tonight. I ask, please stand up and take a bow. And in a little while, you will learn more directly what this was all about. The quick version is they won an Ig Nobel Prize for using chromatography to separate drunk and sober worms. This is the beginning of their paper called Chromatographic Separation of Active Polymer-like Worm Mixtures by Contour Length and Activity. And here they are at the Ig Nobel Prize ceremony accepting the prize. We gave a prize in the field of demography. Demography is a word most people never run across. It's the study, it's the counting of people. How many people live here? How many people do a particular activity over there? Counting people. We gave the prize in the field of demography to Saul Justin Newman for some detective work he did to discover that many of the people famous for living the longest lives lived in places that had lousy birth and death record keeping. This is the beginning of one of his papers. He has been having a terrible time getting his papers published in his own field of study. When he submits these to demography journals, they do not want to believe that he could possibly be correct, and they keep rejecting these things. And here he is at the Ig Nobel Prize ceremony. And finally, the 10th prize we gave this year was in the field of biology. Went to two people who did an experiment back about 1940. This also was a prize awarded posthumously. They won for exploding a paper bag next to a cat that's standing on the back of a cow to explore how and when cows spew their milk. Is that clear to everybody? This is their paper called Factors Involved in the Ejection of Milk. They're dairy scientists. They study cows and everything about the industry with cows and milk and cheese. Very Swiss in a way. And they were trying to answer a question that at the time was a big puzzle to farmers and to scientists, which is every once in a while a cow will simply let all of its milk go. And the guess was that maybe a cow does this when it's frightened, but nobody was sure. So they wanted to test it. So then there comes the question, how can you reliably frighten a cow? And that's what they came up with, this method. Here are the daughter and grandson of one of the authors who came to the Ig Nobel ceremony to accept the prize. And then we had a demonstration which involved an inflatable cow with a person inside, a toy cat, 5 paper bags, which were blown up and exploded by 5 Nobel laureates. We believe this was a unique moment in history. We also believe this was a meaningless moment in history, but it was probably unique. And this photo was taken moments after the ceremony ended, just to give you an idea of what it feels like to be in the room when all of these people are gathered together. And one more winner I want to show you. If you came last year, you're familiar with what I'm going to show you now. It's become sort of a tradition for us. It's a paper that's become very famous, a psychology paper. We gave the prize in the year 2000, and it's this paper. The authors have become so famous for this paper that their names are Kruger and Dunning. And what they discovered is now known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. You'll see it mentioned in the news quite often, the Dunning-Kruger effect. So Dunning and Kruger are 2 psychologists who published this paper about the Dunning-Kruger effect, and they won an Ig Nobel Prize for it, at which point they became really famous because it got a lot of publicity. Let me read you the title of this paper. The paper is called Unskilled and Unaware of It, How Difficulties in Recognizing One's Own Incompetence Lead to Inflated Self-Assessments. Let me read that again. Unskilled and unaware of it, how difficulties in recognizing one's own incompetence lead to inflated self-assessments. You know, I live in the United States of America. I want to thank you for allowing me to come here and be in this peaceful, loving, wonderful country for even a few days. I'm very grateful. We, and especially I, became so intrigued by this Dunning-Kruger effect. Everybody here, I'm quite sure, knows people who demonstrate this effect and has had experience with some of those people. We became so intrigued that one year I wrote the new opera for the Ig Nobel ceremony about the Dunning-Kruger effect. And I'm going to show you now video from that first performance of the opera. It's the Dunning-Kruger song. The character, I mean, it's an opera, so it's fictional. The character who's singing it is a psychologist who decides he's going to explain the Dunning-Kruger effect to a room full of strangers he's just walked into. He just decided that he's going to do it and they'll enjoy it. So you can see the psychologist explaining the Dunning-Kruger effect, and you can see how the people in this room, it's actually a pub, a bar, you can see how they react to being explained to.
Psychologists have shown that people unskilled at something somehow do not know their own incompetence. No, incompetence. Some people's own incompetence somehow gives them a stupid sense that anything they do is first rate. They think it's great. But no, it's not. The research clearly shows such people's perceptions as a distraction. They don't know that they don't know.
So now if you see or hear the Dunning-Kruger effect mentioned in the news, you'll have a clear idea of what it's about and why it's being mentioned. The 35th first annual Ig Nobel Prize ceremony will happen this coming September, and it will be webcast. It will be again at MIT in Massachusetts, and I hope you will join us, either in person or watching the webcast for that. You might be interested, if you like this kind of research, things that are so surprising it makes people laugh and then think. That's what our magazine is like, and it's online. You can see it, and it's about everything in the world. There's more research that's been done and is being done than you can possibly dream of, and people send the best and the worst of it to us. This is the first event here in this year's Ig Nobel EuroTour, so we'll be doing a show in Zurich tomorrow, and then some things in England next week, and then in Amsterdam after that. So if you have friends in any of those other places, send them along. So that's an introduction to this stuff. And now it's my great pleasure and honor to have 3 of the winning teams from this recent year who are here, who are going to do each team a 10-minute talk. So they have 10 minutes to tell you what they did, and then we have time to take just a small number of questions if you have questions about it. To help them keep their speech to exactly 10 minutes, we have some devices. We have 2 devices. One of them is that every time a minute has passed, there will be a noise to indicate. Our timekeeper here, first of all, is capable of telling time, and he has a device called a wristwatch, which tells time. When the speaker begins to speak, he will make a noise. Please make the noise to demonstrate. And then every time a minute has passed, if the equipment allows, he will make a noise again. At the 10-minute mark, at the end of the speech, he will make another noise, and then he will continue making that noise until the speaker stops. That's half of our timekeeping device. The other half is seated over here on the other side of the stage. We have 3 human beings wearing banana costumes. When there is exactly 1 minute left in the speech, 9 minutes have gone by, there's only 1 minute left, the bananas will stand up and do this over the next minute. Please, bananas, come and demonstrate. They will walk slowly across the stage, in front of the people sitting there, so they're visible, and they walk toward this direction. Okay? It's a demonstration, so you can walk faster right now. And while the person is there talking, finishing up, we hope finishing up the speech, the bananas will arrive at exactly the 10-minute mark and then will make themselves known to the speaker, who may need some reminding that it's time to stop speaking. Thank you. Our first 10-minute long talk will be given by 2 members of that large team that did the experiment with flipping coins. And they've traveled here today from the Netherlands to talk with us. Please welcome Alexandra Salafoglu and František Bartoš.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm going to stand over here. We would like to start our presentation actually with a little quiz to test your history knowledge. We wanted to ask you what the first flight of the Wright brothers, the 1968 soccer championship, and 2 local elections in the Philippines have in common. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to think about it. And the answer is that they were all decided by the toss of a coin. And that is because throughout history, the coin toss is seen as the symbol of a random event. So whenever we want to break a tie or we want to make a decision between 2 equally good options, we just flip a coin and then we decide based on that. And that is based on 2 assumptions. The first one is that the coin itself does not have a preference to land either on heads or tails. And the second assumption is that the person who's actually tossing the coin is not able to influence the outcome. And we wanted to see whether this was actually correct or not. And you might wonder, why would we do this? So the short answer is because a physicist predicted that a coin flip would be unfair. So to give you a little bit more background knowledge, the physicists Diaconis, Holmes, and Montgomery proposed the so-called dynamical model of coin tossing. And they say that in an ideal scenario, so when a machine tosses a coin, it shoots the coin straight up into the air, and then the coin just rotates on their axis, and then it would land on the same side it started exactly 50% of the time. However, when people flip a coin, they introduce a small degree of wobbliness, or a so-called off-axis rotation. And this wobble causes the coin to spend just a little bit more time in the air with the initial side facing up. And that led those physicists to a counterintuitive but very specific prediction, namely that coins land on the same side they started exactly 51% of the time, not more or less. So that is striking, and it's really hard to distinguish 50% of the time, which would be a fair toss, from 51% of the time. Now, František and I, we are not physicists, and we are not able to prove theories mathematically. We, as psychologists, we conduct experiments. And we computed that in order to test this prediction, you need a lot of coin flips. And to be precise, at least 250,000 coin flips. And we thought, all right, we're not scared of this number. So we recruited 48 people to help us toss the coins. We had 46 different currencies and denominations, including a 2 Swiss franc coin. And we were able not only to have the 250,000 coin flips, but we actually in the end had 350,757 coin tosses. So just to put this into perspective, this amounts to a whopping 650 hours spent tossing. So that is, if you would do it non-stop, 8 hours every day for 81 days. So I think that kind of explains why we needed this army of people helping us. And for their big sacrifice, we made all of them co-authors. And we would like to thank all of them here. Take the opportunity. Yeah. So I wanted to take you a little bit through how the data collection took place in the experiment. So basically, we wanted to start strong. We were also a bit intimidated of the project, and we wanted to kind of rip out the Band-Aid to start getting the coins in. So we did a kickoff event with a 12-hour coin-tossing marathon. So we started at 9 a.m. in the morning and flipped coins until 9 p.m. in the evening. And you also see it on the lower picture there that was after the coin-tossing marathon. You see the sort of dead looks on our faces. We also organized subsequent marathons in Amsterdam and in Mannheim. And we also had additional people flipping coins at home. However, we wanted to make sure that the coin flips adhere to the highest standards of experimental design. So that's why we videotaped every single coin flip, and we also audited the data. So here is some footage of our coin tossing marathon. You can see that we did this on the 4th of December, and we couldn't think of a cozier thing to do during Christmas than to be with your friends with a bonfire in the background, just tossing coins for 12 hours. So you can also see that this was footage during the start of the event. It's still day outside. And it looked a little bit different as the day went on. So here's some footage at the end. We had some sports injuries. The main injuries were cramps in the shoulder and in the forearm from the tossing. And we had this massage gun device to alleviate the pain. But in the end, all the sacrifice was worth it. And František is now going to tell you about the results of the experiment.
Thank you. So, what did we find after all of this data collection ordeal? Well, first we estimated that the probability of coin landing on the same side it started is 50.8%. And here, as you can see on the figure in top right corner, this is incredibly close to the prediction of the Diaconis, Holmes, and Montgomery. Furthermore, we also found that despite the same side bias, the coins were neither biased for heads or tails. Actually, the probability of coins landing on heads was pretty much the 50% you would expect. So, if we circle back to the paper and the dynamical bias in coin toss, we find quite a strong evidence to support the theory. But this is not all. We have some additional results. So here, on this figure, you can see the estimated probability of a coin landing on the same side for each of our 48 coin tossers. If you look closely to the figure, you will see that while some people exhibited very low or almost none same side bias, some people on the further side of the figure exhibited quite a strong bias to the same side. So you could summarize this, that we found quite a strong between people heterogeneity in the same side bias. Why? Well, if we circle back to the theory of coin tossing, you can see that it's the wobble that causes the coin flip. And in our observations and the experiment, we could see that different people were differently skilled at flipping a coin. So it's quite plausible that people who are less skilled flip coins with a little bit more bias, a little bit more wobble, which results in more bias. Well, this is still not all. We have one more result for you. Here, on this figure, you can see how does the bias, the probability of the same side evolve across the experiment, across the coin-tossing journey of each of our participants. So at the beginning, when you are still fresh and you do only a couple thousand coin flips, the bias seems to be quite large. But later, towards the end, if you manage to collect up to 20,000 coin flips, the bias seems to disappear. So why is this the case? Well, we believe that, again, because the bias is caused by the wobble in the coin flip, that at the beginning, people usually don't know how to flip a coin properly. And after going through thousands and thousands of coin flips, the coin flipping technique of the people flipping the coins improves and ends up being almost unbiased. So I don't have any more additional bonus results for you, but I have some take-home messages. The first message is that the coins are fair. So if you flip a coin, the chance it will land on heads or tails is 50%. However, the coins, the flips of the people flipping them are, I'm terrified. The tosses are not so fair. So if you happen to be at the European League Championship or deciding some local elections, I would highly recommend that you hide the initial side of the coin and don't give this advantage to anybody. Thank you very much.
Our next talk is being given by the team that did that research comparing what happens in the northern hemisphere and what happens in the southern hemisphere that apparently produces different directions of hair swirl on people's heads. Please welcome Marjolaine Willems and Roman Kansari.
Hello, everybody. We are very happy to tell you today a story, our story of worlds. So, in the beginning was a hair wall. In fact, 14 years ago, I gave birth to two fantastic identical twin daughters. And as I'm a clinical geneticist, obviously the first thing I noticed is that they didn't have the same localization on the scalp of their hair wall. One on the left, the other one on the right. So I was already interested with the hair wall as a clinical geneticist, but I began to look in the streets, in the playgrounds, on all the hair wall. So the hair wall, you know, you all have one or more hair wall, preferentially one unique. And that is something that is oriented and lateralized. So as you can see in this delicious pomme duchesse, you can have clockwise or anti-clockwise. So 5 years later, what happened? I had the good fortune to see two different events, 1 week apart. First, I met my two newborn nieces. They were also identical twins, and they had exactly the same pattern of hair as my daughters. And I met two twin boys who obviously were identical twins, but from two separate placenta, and the mother told me, and they had specific hair walls, since one had one at the middle, unique, and the other one had 2 hair walls. And this pattern was already described in an old publication. That was enough, that was too much. I decided to call my friend Roman and to conduct a real prospective study about hair wall. So we came back first to the basics. We wondered why we have hair wall. There is a mathematical theorem that expresses that you can't comb a hairy ball flat without creating a colic, or you can't comb the hair on a coconut. That's very different with a donut. You can have a donut without colic, but our problem, our scalp is not, it's only a portion of sphere. So we postulated that there is intricate genetic and physical constraints to determine the configuration of hair walls. Other authors already were interested in hair walls. There was a lot of studies, but only from northern hemisphere countries. And they saw that most of us have a single hair wall, clockwise oriented. Many authors wanted to associate this with various and fake characteristics, like, for example, sexual orientation. It was, after that, denied. And then we decided to have our twin study, or to perform first a twin study. So, if you remember, there are 2 sorts of twins, dizygotic twins. They come from 2 different eggs, and so they have, during pregnancy, there is 2 placentas, so we call that dichorionic. And you have monozygotic twins. They came from 1 unique egg, and then they separate. So you can have, depending on the time they separate, either monochorionic with only 1 placenta, or dichorionic. So in fact, when you have monochorionic twins, they are all monozygotic, all identical twins, versus when you have dichorionic twins, they can be either monozygotic or dizygotic. In fact, if you have same-sex dichorionic twins, they are in 20% of the case monozygotic. So we decided to check all the twins from all the same-sex twins in the maternity of both hospitals in Paris and Montpellier, and to look on hair wall localization and direction. So we obtained these results. We were a little bit disappointed because we only proved that in twins, hair wall tend to rotate in the same direction. But at this moment, woman had another idea.
Yes, so we proved first that if you take twins, the worlds seem to rotate in the same direction, which would indicate that maybe there is some kind of genetic influence on hair wall rotation. But then I work as a craniofacial surgeon in Paris, and I have some colleagues in Santiago de Chile that are good surgical colleagues, and we have some WhatsApp groups where we exchange lots of pictures of heads of children, because we discuss the cases. So he regularly sends me pictures of baby heads, and we discuss the head shapes and the surgeries. And when I was looking at those heads, I realized that, surprisingly, they seem to be a significant number of counterclockwise hair rolls. So we decided to conduct this study with Roberto Requena, my colleague from Santiago. He sent me lots of pictures of heads of babies seen from above. Confidentiality was preserved because you only see the above the head, so it was not personal data. And we realized that, in fact, there was significantly more counterclockwise hair rolls in the southern hemisphere compared to the northern hemisphere, which is quite an unexplained fact. Of course, everyone would think about the Coriolis force. We digged a bit into the Coriolis force, which is, lots of people think it's an urban legend. In fact, there are some very strong papers about the Coriolis force, but it concerns very big volumes of water. For instance, when you empty swimming pools, it doesn't work on sinks. But still, it obviously doesn't work for our model. So we don't have an explanation for this. So our global hypothesis was that there may be a congenital genetic force driving the rotation direction of hair rolls based on our result on twins. And there also may be some geographic hemispheric influence on the rotation of hair rolls based on our hemispheric data, with a total mystery on the origins of those forces. The next one. And of course, the outcomes of this study seem a bit unusual and not useful from a medical perspective, but the interaction between the external environment and the developmental forces is really a central concern in human development and in disease. So this is just a small hint on the potential effect on the environment on developmental processes, which can also, this kind of phenomenon can also interfere with other growth mechanisms such as laterality and the position of the organs in the body. So it probably refers to a more global phenomenon that we don't understand, related to the effect of external factors on human development. But of course, we don't have the answer yet on the origin of this environmental cause. And this led us to investigate a few more topics on twinning and on the interaction of the external environment with growth. For instance, there is a European registry on all the medical conditions associated with twinnings called EuroCat, and thanks to all the discussions around our paper, thanks to the Ig Nobel Prize, we established linked with this EuroCat registry, and we are probably gonna, in the next few months, probably gonna be able to investigate all the medical conditions associated with twinnings and see if this global condition of twinning is associated with specific medical conditions and malformations. And of course, all this relates to the global question of external mechanical forces versus congenital genetic mechanisms in the development, and more specifically in the development of the head and neck. And this topic is still full of mysteries. Thank you.
Before you go, I realize I forgot with the first team to take questions. So I'll have you come back for questions. We'll take questions for the first team in a little bit. I apologize for forgetting. But I won't forget for this team. If you have questions, please raise your hand and twirl or not as you want, but raise your hand so we can tell. Choose whoever.
Yes, there is a question. How many heads? In the study? Yeah, it was a small study.
Could you repeat the question?
How many subjects we included into the study? It was a small study. We had 100 children in the study. So obviously it requires expansion. We also need to compare with other geographical areas. Maybe there's a bias in Santiago de Chile that we don't know about. So of course, all the kids were born, the one we included from South America, they were born in Santiago de Chile. So, but we don't have much information about their family origins or anything. So, of course, it requires confirmation. But there is a signal in the data. Yes?
Do you think there's a difference with the distance from the equator?
There are people watching on the webcast, so please repeat the question.
So the question is there an influence of the distance with the equator? So we applied for some funding to go to equator.
Exactly.
And so we plan to go for a field trip in equator.
Yes, maybe something kind of similar to what he had asked. Did you try, in case you bring parents from one of the hemisphere and then you put them in another hemisphere and the baby is born in the different hemisphere, will that make any difference? Do you have any hypothesis on that, or?
You want to answer? So I don't think we'll get the ethical approval for this. But we can try. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, one more question.
What is the physical mechanism behind this errors? Can't just calm it from clockwise to counterclockwise? Like what determines it intrinsically? Why can't you just calm it to whatever you like?
That's a question for the medical geneticist.
Don't know.
The physical mechanisms behind the origins of the...
We don't know, in fact, where the walls come from. If there is a centripetal mechanism or centrifugal, the opposites, and we don't know where it comes from and why.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone here in the room who thinks that you have a good answer to this question?
Thank you.
Microphone.
I can shout it. Do hair contain iron?
Repeat the
Perhaps
question,
a
please.
magnetic
Repeat the question for the webcast.
So the question is, do hair contain iron?
Very small.
Yeah, I mean, as any other organ, there is a certain amount of iron. So that could be one explanation, probably more plausible than the Coriolis force.
Magnetic effect, yes.
I have a question. How is that an answer? Yeah, in fact, no, it's not an answer. It's really a question for you, Nicola. Yeah. How is that an answer to this question?
Yeah.
I see, yes, thank you. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Alexander and František, I apologize for not taking questions right after you gave your talk. Could you please come up here now? And whatever questions you have about the coin toss, please raise your arm.
Over there, maybe?
Okay. Could you repeat the question, please?
Whether during all the tossing, whether coins also landed on the side. I don't think I had a case where it landed exactly on the side. Do you remember of a case?
Yeah, I think in theory, when you flip the coin, you have to catch it in your hand for the experiment, and if it lands in between your fingers, that we decided that we will not count this as a valid coin toss. So for our coins to be counted in the experiment, you have to flip and catch them in the palm of your hand.
Yeah, it was also invalid flip if it landed on the floor. You can, yeah, like this.
Good. This question here.
Did you note a correlation between the imbalance and the size of the coin?
Okay. And repeat the question.
Yeah, so the question was whether we noted a correlation between the size of the coin and the bias, and we did not. And actually, I think it's a great question. Our data are all available online. So if you go to the link, you can download the data set. We have the information about the coins the people flipped for each of the coin flips, and you can try to compute and assess this bias. Mm. The issue is that despite the fact that we have 350,000 coin flips, we have only 48 coins types. So if you want to look at correlations of these very small effects, you would probably need much larger sample size. So I would recommend getting a sample of hundreds of coin types to be able to determine the possible correlations on the coin levels.
But we are here also hundreds of people, so we can make it possible.
So, please.
I can try.
Repeat the question.
Oh, yeah. Whether it makes a difference if we toss it with the right hand or the left hand.
So this is my flip with right hand, where I flip more than 20,000 coin flips. You can see I feel a bit proficient in this. I flipped, I think, like 50 with my left hand. Actually, not.
It's not too bad.
It was quite good, but we didn't do counterbalancing or switching hands. So everybody usually just took a coin and did as many flips they can within the 12 hours.
Over here. Yeah, that is also a very good question. The question was whether, whether the people or the participants who were flipping the coins knew of the hypotheses that we want to see whether it lands on the same side it started 51% of the time. And the answer is yes, our participants knew about the hypotheses. However, whilst they were flipping the coins, they were not aware of what the percentage is that they were currently tossing. So we were not aware up until the end, until the data was analyzed, whether we were stable tossers, close to 50%, or wobbly tossers at 51%. So I would argue that it's very hard to bias a result in a certain direction if you don't really know whether what it is you're doing, whether you're doing a good job or a bad job.
Okay. And one last question.
I think there.
Okay, that's a very good question, and
good, and please
and it's a very good question, and the question was whether it's possible to practice your coin flip to bias the result. And we actually got this question from our reviewers on the manuscript, who say that we are just biasing the coins while flipping them. In fact, I mean, I flipped coins 20,000 times, and I cannot tell you how it's going to land. So I don't know how many flips the coin is going to do in the air, whether how high it is going to be, and you cannot determine when you catch it whether it's going to be heads or tails. The thing is, because the bias is introduced by the wobbliness, if you train hard, you can learn how to flip coins to just wobble and never turn over, and that's what the magicians do. And actually, that's also the background of Diaconis himself. He, apart from being a famous physicist in Stanford, he also does a little sleight of hand and magic on the side, and he flips coins, shuffle cards. I would recommend checking his other research, because you might find many other interesting
hypotheses
about these things.
Yeah, good. Thank you very much. Our final speaker also has come today from the Netherlands. She is part of the team that did the research about seeing whether they could find a chemical means of separating drunk and sober worms. Please welcome Tess Hieremans.
First check how this works, because I press this button. Huh? Yeah. Okay, hi. So, I will tell you today about why we use chromatography to separate drunk and sober worms. But first, let me introduce you to the worm team that I am representing today. Because in 2020, we started this research when I was a bachelor student in the Physics Institute. And it was a collaboration also with the Van het Hof Institute, the Chemistry Institute. And Antoine Desblais was my daily supervisor. And I was very lucky to have not only one, but 3 supervisors, also Daniel Bon and Sander Woutersen. And actually, we also have 2 other team members that are the sober worm, that is, the name is Tubi, because they are Tubifax worms, and tipsy. I don't know if there are Dutch people here, but tipsy is actually a word of being a bit like a woo, you know? Yeah, so I have a surprise for you, because they are with us today. So I think they can sit with our worm representatives. All right. And I lost my, oh here, yeah. And I also like to thank Jacqueline Woutersen, the mother of the puppets, because she handmade the puppets. So the project is in the research field of active matter, and active matter is matter that extracts energy from the surroundings and converts it into a mechanical force or motions, like these beautiful flocks of birds that are interesting for robotic systems. Here you see another example of active matter that are E. coli bacteria. They are powering a mechanical ratchet, so it's for harvesting energy. Interesting. And here you see sperm cells that are studied to look at the success rate of fertilization. And what they have in common is that the efficiency of performing the task in these kinds of systems is directly related to the activity. But to study that, you need to know, like, how can we sort active matter by the activity? And more specifically, we asked the question, how can we sort active polymers by activity? Now, some of you may not know what is a polymer, but it looks a bit like a chain of a necklace that are different molecules attached together. And here you see a simulation of a regular polymer that's just passive, moving only by thermal fluctuations. But what we studied was a way more practical model, because this happens on a very small scale. But we studied Tubifax worms. You can buy them at the fish store for only just €1 or franc. And they are a living polymer, and they have activity, so they only move by this activity. And my professor Sander remembered them from when he was a child, feeding the fish. So then we wanted to see, okay, we have this practical thing that you can see the worm wiggling, but how do you sort them? Well, first I will show you how you might sort polymers that are passive. You have a column, you see it from the top, and then from the left side there's a imposed flow. And if you inject a mixture of polymers, then you can sort them by size. So this is a known technique in chemistry, but you you don't separate them by activity like that. But it might work. So what we did, we scaled up this idea of this chromatography to the size of the worms, like something that was so small to half a meter size at the UvA Technology Centers. So I learned together with Matthijs Bakker how to build this. It was really cool. And then when it was finished, you can construct it like this. This is a side view, and you have a start where you inject worms, and then you observe them with the camera from the top, and there's an imposed flow, and at the finish you get them out. But when it was done, the COVID lockdown happened, so we could not go to the lab. So we moved the whole setup in a van to my student house at that time. And there I injected worms and separated them by size, and then more interestingly, inject worms of the same size and study active and passive worms in there. And I don't mean passive, but actually less active worms. But how do you have less active worms or active worms? Well, my professors already knew the trick to that, because they went to the lab on a Friday afternoon. And they studied first a worm moving in water, and then they added a bit of beer. And you see, it moves very differently. I tell this to my friends in the pub always, like a sober worm moves like this, and a drunk worm moves like woo. And then they tell me, well, Tess, if you are drunk, you move like so it's not so straightforward. So now I want to know of you, what do you think if we put a drunk and a sober worm in this column with an imposed flow? Who is going with the flow? If you think the sober worm, stand up. If you think it's the drunk worm who will win the race, then you stay and sit down. So everyone thinks it's the drunk worm? Well, let's find out. So we did this experiment one more time at MIT in September. And let's see what happens. So the red is the sober worm, eh?
And the winner is sober worm.
Yes. So the sober worm wins. Sorry. But why does the sober worm win? Well, we tracked their displacements in the channel on the y-axis over time. And you see that they move kind of with the same velocity, but this drunk worm, the blue worm, then stops at some point and then continues. So there's a plateau. And what actually happens there is that, look at what happens here, is a drunk worm. And then, bam, here. It gets a bit trapped. So it depends on the conformations that the worm take and the interaction with these pillars. And when they are drunk, they have more like this trapping and gliding and faulting. While at a higher activity, they are able to curl and knot and continue. So we provided a reliable method to sort active polymer-like worms based by their length and their activity. So what's next? You can now you know that it works. It was very cheap, very handy experiment. Now you can go back to small scales and maybe study success rates for EVF. So this Ig Nobel winning publication was published in 2022 in Science Advance. You can read the details there. And then we went to pick up the award at MIT. Here we are waiting. And then this is 1 minute before. Oh, and then we come up. And then we got our prize. $10 trillion. Yes, so we are rich. But what now? So it's actually now I'm a PhD student in self-organizing matter at AMOF. And Daniel is working on polymer sprays, and he has a lot of open positions. And Sander is kicking off with his spin-off IR Dosi and study protein structures and dynamics. But who has been really our worm guy working with worms for the last 4 years is Antoine Desblais, doing rheology on worms, surface tension, blob locomotion, climbing, and he also looks at robotic systems and compares them. So with that, I like to close off already. I'm way in time. And thank you all. And yeah, I also invite you to the, here. To the Ig Nobel night at the Nemo in Amsterdam, 15th of April. Or tell your friends. Thanks.
If you have questions about this, raise your arm, please.
So
could you
your
repeat? Yeah.
Your question was which type of alcohol, right? So we only looked at the percentage. I tried different brands in Amsterdam, like Amstel, Heineken, different types, and they all worked. So you're good to go. Try a Swiss one, it doesn't matter. Yes.
Did you have some way of measuring which worm was having the best time during the experiment?
Sorry, which worm?
Like which worm was having more fun during the experiment?
Having more fun.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a very good question. We had a discussion today if it's actually possible that the worms all have individual characters. And we discussed it, there is evidence for that, but I didn't observe that. But I think, what do you think? Are you having more fun when you're a bit drunk or sober? It's also subjective, you know? Yeah. Yeah, I was asking myself the same question, but yeah, you know, this experiment doesn't work at all, I think, if you use a dead worm. So they just get stuck forever, basically. And also, you know, I really would not have liked to, kill them. They sober up, by the way, pretty quick. I think within 10 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes. So.
Would you like to say a few words about, to continue this question?
Yeah.
What is the difference between a dead worm and a dead trout?
Yeah, well, the dead trout can still swim. So let's study next if the dead worm also does that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would this work also explain some of the flow that you have of people in the disco?
Yeah, well, that's such a nice question. There's also an artist, and I'm so sorry I forgot his name, but maybe someone else knows, that makes movies of, I see you nothing, do you know the name? Do you want to say it? Oh. Okay, but he makes movies from dancing crowds. So I thought it's super cool to use that scientifically, you know, to see how that is different or not. Yeah, because what do you think? If you feel like drunk and you move towards people, do you get stuck? Do you get home earlier or later? You know, I know the answer to that myself. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, is there one last question?
I see there something. Yeah, other substances. Yeah, So maybe even make it more active.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I...
Do you have a suggestion about which other substances?
I think someone told me or showed that it worked. I didn't do it myself, but I had the idea as well. When I was 16 or something, I got this Ritalin prescribed. So yeah, you probably can do that to make them more active. But it was not necessary in our experiments. Thank you for the question.
Okay. Thank you, Tess.
Thank you.
Well, this is everything we've come to tell you tonight. These are, of course, just the beginnings of these stories, just the beginnings of these questions that have been explored here. We are now building toward the next Ig Nobel Prize ceremony. If you now or in the future hear of somebody or hear of some team that's done something that makes you laugh and then think somebody or some team that you believe should win an Ig Nobel Prize, tell us, please. That's how we learn about almost everyone who's won an Ig Nobel Prize. One person somewhere noticed, and they told us. And yes, you can nominate yourself. The chance of winning if you nominate yourself is very small, but it's greater than 0. So, please give it a try. I want to thank EPFL for inviting us today again, and everybody involved with that. Thank you in the back for giving us this very fine sound and light. Thank you to Lydia for an immensely lengthy welcome speech. And to the escort who devised this idea of slowing it down. And to our Ig Nobel winners, Alexandra and František, please stand and take another bow. Marjolaine and Roman. Tess and the worms. Please let the worms stand up and take a bow. The worms. Yeah, so let the worms take a bow too. Okay. Our immensely strong timekeeper. And most of all, please, a warm expression of thanks and appreciation to the bananas. I'll finish by saying one thing. It's the traditional thing that I say every year at the end of the Ig Nobel Prize ceremony. If you did not win an Ig Nobel Prize this year, and especially if you did, better luck next year. Thank you. That's wonderful. Okay. That's it. Okay. Yeah.